Well, hello everyone. A little bit noisy. We have here the pleasure to have Carmen Carré with us.
Thank you.
Perfect, wonderful. We can be here more comfy.
Thank you.
And she is the Chief Operating Officer of a firm called Bubble, which is really incredible what they do. She's going to explain it much better than I do. But I think the topic today is to talk about customer centricity and what is the strategy behind and what is really the impact that we can have actually in the company. So I'm going to start actually talking about what is customer centricity in your opinion with all this strategy that we see companies tackling right now about what digital transformation is and how to solve really the customer's problems.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be here with you. Thanks for making the time. So I come from a B2B SaaS background, so I'm a bit biased. I'm sure a lot of you here are driving B2C businesses, and this is a great place to be if you're looking for growth and funding. So I'll explain my bias now, but I think the general definition I use is applicable across both B2B and B2C. And I look at customer centricity in a very simplistic way. It's about solving your customers' problems holistically. It's about adding value to them in a meaningful way. It's about defining a value proposition that connects you with those customers and helps them further their business, achieve their objectives, and be successful. So it's incumbent upon us as leaders of technology businesses to understand our customer space and to design the ways of working inside our business to deliver that kind of an outcome. It sounds pretty easy to do. It sounds very logical, and gee whiz, Carmen, of course we'll do that. But it's quite difficult.
Right. We see leadership getting more and more involved in this customer centricity strategy. We see people like Satya Nadella, the CEO from Microsoft, which is really understanding that the only way really to move forward is changing the way actually of working and how people are actually being empowered to really learn new things, understanding that failure is going to be part of the journey. How do you see the involvement actually of leadership?
I think leadership's the linchpin of all of this. I think the leadership of the organization has to take this seriously and not give it lip service. Yeah, we're customer-centric. You know, we have good customer support. We answer the phone really fast and we solve our problems very quickly. That's not what it's about. It's about saying genuinely the whole company is going to align behind this strategy. That we're going to take the time to understand from our entire sales to service process and strategy what that means and how we build a customer-centric view into every part of our business. So the leadership needs to take a stance, it needs to be authentic, and they need to back it up. They need to back it up by empowering the organization to own it across your different functions. They need to back it up with process that is frictionless and makes this easy for you inside the business, for your customers, for your partners, for your ecosystem. They need to have a digital strategy that joins the dots to understand how we make sure we automate, we have transparency, we're looking all the time at continuous improvement through technology, through process, using the smart people we have in this business. And it means they have to commit to transparency. And that starts with gathering data, turning that into useful information, sharing it with you, and understanding where can we improve, what are our customers telling us, and how do we build that into everywhere we work in the business and everything we do. So it starts with leadership first. If that's not serious, if your leader isn't authentic about that, I doubt you'll be successful because we have to live and breathe it and we have to show that to the team.
Totally. We see right now, you mentioned about digital really a strategy, you know? We have seen for the last years especially that there's like a big trend of shaping what was the strategic plan that a company will have and what is the digital strategy are no longer being understood as two different things. We see like they're actually merging, no?
Yes.
Digital strategy and a strategic plan is the same thing. At the end, there's going to be only one strategy as a company, no? And the consequence is really customer satisfaction and as a consequence, revenue. How do you see critically really the digital strategy, the data, and the information really be gathered in the organization to empower this?
It's a great question and a really difficult thing, I think, to tackle. So I think your point is very salient around start with data and don't do strategy and then go, oh gosh, what about the data? What about the metrics? What about the information? How are we going to do this? And I think a lot of companies here are in a startup mode and you're moving into growth phase. So you have the opportunity to do this early instead of having to figure it out when you have unsatisfied customers or unsatisfied employees and have to transform. So think about your measures that are important. You know, there are obvious things that you want to look at around your NPS, your CAC, your lifetime value of your customers, but think about other measures in your business that are equally important. What's happening in your engineering cycle? How much time of your innovation cycles are spent on fixing customer-driven issues, of addressing customer-driven requests? Think about innovating in the voice of the customer and marry that with your unique innovation that made your value proposition interesting, but make sure you're understanding that. So look at the metrics across the business and instrument from sales, who are my customers, where am I getting them, what's working in that cycle, what's converting, what's sticking, what's my expansion revenue? Do I have negative net churn because my expansion is exceeding my churn? These are the types of things that you need to look at. So when you're looking at your strategy and you're saying, okay, I understand, I'm focused on new acquisition, and here's the point I can go to land and expand. What are my metrics around expansion? What team do I have in place? What am I going to sell that's going to stick? But think about not just sales, think about customer support, obviously, but think about engineering and product management. How much time are your product managers spending in the field with customers? And metrics that bring the customer to life in your strategy. So define what you're trying to achieve, define what good looks like, define the measures that help you unpack what's happening in your performance, and share that with your team. But do it across your business, or you're missing an opportunity to be amazing for yourselves and for your customers.
For what I'm hearing also, you are really suggesting in the change of culture on how you can actually work more in a multidisciplinary way instead of working in silos, in especially larger organizations, how you are able actually to create multidisciplinary teams that can be working actually in a much more agile and transparent and data-driven way, yes. Correct?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. We're a SaaS business, so if you think about what we do, irrespective of the value proposition we sell, we deliver an outcome to our customers. They buy a service. They don't buy a technology. They buy an outcome. You made me a promise. I expect you to deliver on that promise. So that service experience inherently means that every part of the business has to collaborate. Every part of the business has to be joined up on what we're trying to achieve. So I really like to see cross-functional working groups. I like to see product groups working in the field across teams. I like that concept of building that into your ways of working, because when you build silos, you miss the opportunity to learn about what's happening in the customers, but also what's happening within teams. Totally. That an idea, an innovation, feedback that needs to be shared.
Correct.
So build that into your ways of working.
That's great. This, I think a big challenge that we all face with our organizations, whether it's a small, medium, or large, right, which is how to operationalize really innovation in the company. No? At the end, it's kind of like a challenge to really have these multidisciplinary teams as this different way of working, as you are mentioning, how you're able to have really an innovation pipeline that you have multidisciplinary teams that can be working at the short term, but also at the midterm, and then also at the longer term. No? How to have people working for what's next in this year, next year, but also in parallel for the next 2 to 3 years, or to the next 5 or even 7 years.
Yes. Yeah.
How do you see that?
That's a tough one. I think a lot of organizations struggle with that, especially when they have a level of maturity and they have products out in the market that they need to continue to support. They have great customers that they need to keep happy, but they want to keep innovating, they want to keep differentiating, and they want to be better. And I think that you have to find the magic that works for you, right? What works in your business, what works in your culture. But I would highly encourage you to make sure that you don't create separation in those teams, like the old guys and the new guys, or the old guys and the new girls. You know, keep that innovation spirit alive, because the ideas we get from customers will often be the next great idea if we understand how to contextualize that across all of our customers or potentially open a new market. They will bring us a lot of ideas, and again, marry that with the unique value proposition that caused you to start in the first place. But try to keep innovation as a core cultural concept, and not just in product or development. Open it up to your customer service people. Open it up to your finance people. Open it up to the teams, because especially if you're selling a service, every one of those functions matters.
That's a great point. Innovation like digital should not be a department, should be completely across. Every employee actually in an organization should feel empowered actually to play with the digital handbook, and also empower innovation in the job that they're actually doing, in the role that they're playing in the organization. Going in this line of employees, which at the end is really the key in any organization, doesn't matter if it's a startup or if it's a large corporation. One of the key things actually for people to keep thriving, I love what you wrote about, like, good employees are actually happy, happy employees are happy customers. In Propellant, where we work, it's very interesting. In a design studio, we have the same philosophy, which is we always said people go first, then the projects, and then the company, always in that order. How do you see really how to empower employees and the impact that they have actually in customer satisfaction?
Well, my team will smile because they know I'm kind of nuts about this, because I'm nuts about them, right? They are the business, and if they're engaged, they're aligned, they feel informed, we're transparent, we create the right passion in the organization, they will embody that in everything they do. Right, so it's an act. It's like customer centricity. It's part of it. Engage your employees, understand where they're coming from, measure their engagement, measure their satisfaction, and find vehicles and ways to engage with them formally and informally to make sure you're getting their feedback. But that aligned, empowered, inspired and informed organization is going to take you very far. And the other thing I think is really important about the team is don't be afraid to share bad news. Hey, we missed the number. Hey, we just rolled something to production that bombed and we had to roll it back. And 20,000 customers were waiting for that release, right? We had an outage. Don't be afraid. Share it, because those people are going to say, by golly, we're not going to let that happen again. They will have the answers that maybe as leaders you haven't thought of yet. So bring them in and help them make the company better by sharing all the news, because they are the people who run the business every day. It's not the COO, right? It's the hundreds of people in the business that make it happen. So I think it's important that like you want to measure all aspects of your business and what's happening with your customers, start now building employee engagement into your culture and make sure you understand it. Don't assume you know. We have a great culture, we innovate, everyone's happy, we drink beer, it's good. Do you really know? We just did an engagement survey. It was so enlightening. We had a wonderful engagement score. We had 91% participation in August in Portugal. I was impressed. That's like 110%, right? And we learned from our team that they want us to do better on our service quality. Fantastic. Okay, great. That's the feedback directly from the team. We can do better here. So let's do that. I think those types of things, Ugo, can make a business from good to great.
That's a great point. I think with customer centricity, for what I'm hearing, there's this huge opportunity really to empower the employees and really connect them to what are the problems that they need actually to solve from the customers. How do you measure this? I'm sure that is kind of like one of the key questions that people have. How can you keep improving it based on that data? Do you use any specific tools or anything that can be maybe also useful for all of us? No.
So let me make sure I'm answering the right question. Is it about measuring
process? It can be about the process,
right.
Like which KPIs do you think really are things that can serve different organizations to really measure about employee satisfaction? And in the other hand, is there any tool that you suggest or a combination of tools that you think can provide maybe transparency to this data that at the end can be turned into knowledge by making decisions that really matter? No?
Yeah, well, we just, I don't know if we're allowed to name names here, but we use Culture Amp for our survey. Employee engagement survey, and we found it to be a very intuitive and very intelligent process. It was easy to design the engagement surveys. It was easy to understand the information, and it was very helpful for us to really distill what's going on and what the priorities are from the voice of our team. I think that in terms of measuring across the organization, there's the efficacy of your sales to service life cycle and all of the functions in between, there's a lot of tools, right? Developers use tools. You have your CRM. You may have a different service tool. You may have a number of analytics tools. I think the most important thing, irrespective of the tools, is you define, as we said earlier, the data. And you define what your goal is. So I've joined companies where I see dashboards with lots of numbers, but there's no budget, or there's no target, or there's no objective. So how do I know how I'm doing? So when you're thinking about your strategy, make sure you define what is outstanding, what is good, what is mediocre, and what is, oh my gosh, we need to do something. And build your strategy and your measures around being really clear about what you're trying to achieve.
To accomplish.
And use the tools that work for your business. Because every business has a different set of characteristics and probably a different set of biases.
Correct.
It's about what people will use and what's effective.
Thank you. Would you like to make any final comment before we jump, maybe to ask maybe some questions from the audience, so you also have the opportunity to engage and to have the dialogue?
No final comments. Well, maybe one. Take it seriously, guys, this customer centricity thing. It doesn't just happen. It's not about customer service. It's about your entire organization aligning around your customer and bringing value to them. So build it in early and bring it to life, and your team will respond in kind.
Thank you, Carmen. It's really a pleasure to have you here, especially being one of the leading people in technology around the world. So
thank you.
You have a lot of experience, and I'm sure that it has been very, very useful for everyone, especially for me. So thank you for coming. Any questions from the audience related to customer centricity and experience? There's one in the back of the room. Thank you. This was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really good.
And I hope your football team, turns it around.
Yeah, Real Madrid. Yes, there we go.
Hi. We recently undertook a study to look into the metrics and KPIs of our business and identified some weaknesses, which we are now looking to take action to change them. However, when we approached our customers through feedback sessions, through focus groups, they rejected one of the key changes we want to put forward. And just to keep things simple, we basically want to change from an analog way of doing business to a more digital-focused one. And we see a lot of scalability and growth from this new and improved process in our mind. So what's the right path to basically say this is what we think the business should be heading for, or listen to our customers who are rejecting a change because we think it's just about they always did things in one way and they just want to stick to the same way of doing things. Any experience or thoughts on that?
Yes. Ugo, do you have any experience with that you want to answer?
Please.
No? Okay. It's a great question and a challenging one. And I think that depending on where you are in your cycle as a business, you're going to discover and learn things about your value proposition that will change. And your strategy may change as a result of that. And you may need to look at some of your customers and say, actually, the value proposition we started with solved your problems, and we were wedded on a mission together. But now we need to shift our strategy for these reasons, and we may not fit anymore. And that's hard. Divorcing customers is hard, but if you can't sincerely and honestly, as a business, get behind that strategy anymore and bring that value to them, you will do it poorly, and eventually they will leave you. So the right thing to do is have the open discussion about, here's where we're going, how does that align with your needs, can we reconnect the dots here, or do we need to find a way to gracefully exit? Because it may be the case that this shift in your strategy is going to open up a whole nother go-to-market for you and a whole nother population of customers for whom you can add that value and you can whole problem solve. It's a tough thing. Happy to talk about it more, but I understand where you're coming from, and you really need to be true to your strategy and be true to where you want to, how you want to be with your customers. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, if I can add on that, in our case, our learnings working with different clients from different industries is very similar to what Carmen is also saying. There's a great opportunity on having actually teams that can be working on the short term, mid-term, and longer term. You are working on certain needs, but the good thing is that if you are working in the mid-term and in the longer term on how to add value in their lives, that are, in consequence is going to actually be generating revenues, you have that capacity to actually maneuver. If you are only concentrated in the short term, the problem is that you have to probably from scratch really to do a whole exercise of where you're going actually to be going. But if you have actually part of the organization working on what the midterm and the longer term opportunities for growth really are in order to add value in people's lives, then you can actually maneuver faster. So our recommendation or learning will be that you can have always that short term, midterm, and longer term based on the value proposition that of course is a living animal and is going to always be evolving. No? Any more questions?
Do we have any more questions from the audience? Anybody else? We have about 5 more minutes, so we have a little bit more time for questions for Carmen and Hugo. Anyone? Okay, I have a question for you, Carmen. You mentioned 2 interesting things. You mentioned breaking down silos, allowing different functional areas to work together and collaborate to kind of spur innovation. You also mentioned transparency, things like sharing bad news, for example, that can help foster this open, communicative type of environment. Do you have any other suggestions or examples of how you've been able to kind of foster these types of openly innovative environments within organizations?
Yeah, I really like setting up, when you have a problem to solve, I like setting up cross-functional working groups, right? You may belong in a function and you may sit there and work there every day and you'll work across delivering your deliverables in that role. But maybe there's a new challenge or problem or opportunity that comes up. And I like saying, okay, let's get a cross-functional team around the table and let's tackle this problem. Right? We're in our business now looking at our tool set. You asked about tools. We have a lot. We probably have more than we need. And I'm sure that's a challenge a lot of people have. But rather than me saying, well, we're going to get rid of that, that, and that, we got a cross-functional team together, and we were going through a process of understanding the perspectives and the whys and the value proposition those tools bring to us. But there's this great group of people who will work on this problem for a couple of months, we'll bring it back to the business, will affect a change. So I think when you have an opportunity to do something like that, it really works. And I also think if you have a chance, depending on how your organization is designed around seating, building, are you on floors, are you in a dark room together, are you spread across, are you remote? But take the chance to ask people to work and shadow another department for a week. Learn somebody else's job that will enlighten you, and maybe you can bring some value to that role.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Carmen. Do we have any more questions before we move on to our next guest this afternoon? Okay, well, with that,
much, Carmen.
I would like to thank Hugo and
you.
Carmen very much.
Thank you.